The stars burned cold and distant as the Cathar warships filled the darkness of space. There were hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Their black hulls reflected no light. They moved like a swarm of hungry insects, surrounding the last ships that stood between them and Earth. Admiral Vanessa Cole stood on the bridge of the carrier Endurance. Her hands gripped the metal railing so hard that her fingers had gone white. On the screen in front of her, red dots were disappearing one by one. Each dot was a ship. Each ship held a crew. Each crew member had a family waiting on the planet below. 17 ships remained. They had started with 60-2. The battle for Earth had lasted 9 days. 9 days of fire and death and desperate fighting. 9 days of watching friends die in the cold void of space. And now it was almost over. "Admiral, the destroyer Valiant is gone," said Lieutenant Kevin Park. His voice was shaking. He was only 23 years old, too young to die. But death did not care about age. Vanessa closed her eyes for a moment. Captain Gregory had commanded the Valiant. She had known him for 15 years. They had trained together, fought together, laughed together. Now he was gone, like so many others. "All ships, fall back to position Gamma," she ordered. Her voice was calm even though her heart was breaking. A leader could not show fear. A leader had to be strong when everyone else was falling apart. Protect the evacuation transports. That is our only mission now. Far below, on the surface of Earth, Commander Daniel Hayes looked up at the sky. It was night in North America, and the stars were hidden behind clouds of smoke and dust. But every few seconds, a flash of light would appear above the clouds. Each flash was a ship dying. Daniel stood in the middle of a massive evacuation center in what used to be New York City. The buildings around him were crumbling. The streets were filled with people, millions of people, all trying to reach the shuttles that would carry them to safety. But there were not enough shuttles. There was not enough time. There was not enough of anything. "How many have we saved?" Daniel asked. Lieutenant Maria Santos checked her tablet. Her face was covered in dirt and dried blood. She had not slept in 3 days. None of them had. 1.2 million so far, she said. The colony ships beyond Neptune can hold 2 million total. Maybe a little more if we pack them tight. 2 million people. Earth at 8 billion. Daniel felt something cold settle in his chest. They were going to lose almost everyone. Almost every person on the planet would die or become a slave. All their history, all their culture, all their dreams would be erased. But 2 million would survive. 2 million would escape into the darkness between stars. 2 million would carry the memory of Earth with them. "Keep loading the shuttles," Daniel said. "Every person we save matters." In orbit above Earth, the Cathari flagship moved through the battle like a predator swimming through a sea of dying fish. The ship was called Eternal Triumph, and it was enormous. It could have fit a small city inside its hull. On the bridge of this massive ship, Supreme Commander Zethrak watched the human vessels burn. He felt satisfaction, the deep pleasure of a hunter who had cornered his prey. These humans had been more difficult than expected. They had destroyed nearly 40 of his ships before their defeat became certain. That was impressive for such a primitive species. They would make excellent slaves once they learned their place. "Broadcast on all frequencies," Zethrak commanded. "Tell the humans that resistance is over. If they surrender their military leaders, we will spare their civilian population. If they refuse, we will kill everyone on their planet." The message went out across every radio frequency, every communication channel, every device on Earth that could receive a signal. In bunkers and basements, in evacuation centers and military bases, humanity heard the voice of their conqueror. "Surrender or die." Admiral Cole received the message on the bridge of the Endurance. She read it twice, then a third time. Around her, The surviving crew members were silent. They were waiting for her response. She thought about her daughter, who was hopefully on one of the colony ships by now. She thought about her husband, who had died in the first wave of the invasion. She thought about Earth, beautiful blue Earth, which she would never see again. Then she opened the channel to the Cathari flagship. Cathari Commander. This is Admiral Vanessa Cole of the United Earth Defense Force. We reject your terms. We will never surrender. And one day, we will return. On the Eternal Triumph, Zethrak laughed. It was a clicking sound, like stones rattling together. His officers laughed with him. Brave words from a dying species, he said. Destroy their remaining ships. Leave none alive. The final battle lasted 4 hours. The human ships fought with everything they had. They used missiles and lasers and nuclear weapons. They rammed enemy vessels when their ammunition ran out. They died one by one, each ship taking as many enemies as possible with them. The Endurance was the last to fall. Admiral Cole gave the order to overload the reactors just before the Cathari boarding parties reached the bridge. The explosion was visible from Earth, a new star blazing briefly in the night sky. When the light faded, the battle was over. The Cathari had won. Their ground forces descended on Earth like a plague. Cities burned. Governments fell. Billions of people became prisoners in their own world. The Cathari set up mining operations, slave camps, and processing centers. They began the work of stripping Earth of everything valuable, but they never found the colony ships in the chaos of the final battle. 37 vessels had slipped away into the darkness. They carried 2 million refugees, the genetic codes of every Earth species, and something else. Something the Cathari could not see or measure or understand. They carried a promise on the lead colony ship. A woman named Catherine Webb held her infant son in her arms. The baby was sleeping peacefully, unaware that his world had just ended. Unaware that he would grow up among the stars, far from the planet of his birth. Catherine looked out the viewport at the distant light of Sol, already fading as the ship accelerated into the void. Tears ran down her face, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "We will come back," she whispered to her sleeping son. "I do not know when. I do not know how. But we will come back, and we will make them pay for what they did today." The colony ships disappeared into the darkness between stars. The Cathari declared victory and added Earth to their empire. They wrote humans into their history books as another conquered species, another footnote in their glorious expansion. They believed the war was over. They were wrong. 50 years had passed since the fall of Earth. The Cathari Empire had grown even larger, swallowing 17 more species into its hungry mouth. Their territory now stretched across a quarter of the galaxy. Their power seemed absolute. Their victory seemed complete on the industrial world of Keth Prime. In the shadow of the great Imperial Palace, a human maintenance worker crawled through a ventilation shaft. His name was Samuel Webb, and he was not what he appeared to be to the Cathari guards, who occasionally noticed him. Samuel was just another slave. Humans were everywhere on Keth Prime. They cleaned the floors. They fixed the machines. They served food and carried messages and did all the jobs that the Cathari considered beneath them. After 50 years of breeding and conditioning, the human slaves were docile and obedient. Their spirits had been broken. Their hope had been crushed. Samuel moved silently through the metal tunnel, his gray eyes seeing perfectly in the darkness. He'd been on Keth Prime for 3 years now. In that time, he had mapped every tunnel, every corridor, every room in the Imperial District. He had memorized the patrol schedules of every guard. He had learned the habits of every important official. Tonight, he would kill one of them. Minister Krathel was responsible for the human breeding program. He was the one who had designed the genetic modifications that made slave humans weak and obedient. He had personally overseen the deaths of thousands who resisted the conditioning. He considered humans to be nothing more than useful animals. Samuel found the access panel he was looking for and carefully removed it. Beyond was a lavish bedroom, filled with expensive furniture and precious artwork stolen from a dozen conquered worlds. Minister Krathel sat at a desk, reviewing reports on a glowing screen. He was alone. Samuel dropped silently into the room. The minister looked up, more confused than afraid. Humans did not enter the private quarters of Cathari officials. Humans knew their place. This must be some kind of mistake. Slave, you are not allowed here, Krathel said. Go back to your duties immediately, or I will have you punished. Samuel smiled. It was not a friendly smile. I am not a slave, minister. I am a ghost, and I have come to deliver a message from the people you tried to destroy. Krathel reached for the security button on his desk. He never touched it. Samuel moved faster than any human the minister had ever seen. One moment he was across the room. The next moment he was right there, his hand wrapped around the minister's throat. Krathel tried to scream, but no sound came out. He stared into the gray eyes of his killer and saw something that terrified him. He saw patience. He saw purpose. He saw 50 years of hatred, cold and controlled and absolutely merciless. The minister died without making a sound. Samuel arranged the body carefully. He left no fingerprints, no DNA, no evidence of any kind. But he did leave one thing. On the wall above the minister's desk, he carved a symbol with his knife. A human skull wearing a hood. The sign of death. The sign of vengeance. The sign of the Reaper. The next morning, the Cathari security forces found the body. They searched the entire district. They questioned hundreds of slaves. They reviewed every surveillance recording. They found nothing. The Reaper had struck, and the Reaper had vanished. Over the next 2 years, the Reaper killed 17 more times. Generals died in their beds. Scientists died in their laboratories. Politicians died in their offices. Each killing was impossible. Each victim was surrounded by guards and protected by the best security systems in the Empire. And each time, the Reaper left his mark on the wall. The Cathari were afraid. For the first time in 300 years, they were truly afraid. This was not a war they understood. This was not an enemy they could fight with ships and weapons. This was something else. Something that struck from the shadows and disappeared like smoke. They called it the Ghost War. They executed thousands of human slaves in retaliation for each killing. They implemented new security measures, new surveillance systems, new restrictions on human movement. None of it helped. The truth was that the Reaper was not one person. Samuel was just the first, the original, the prototype. Behind him were 26 other operatives, all trained in the same hidden academies among the asteroids, all inserted into Cathari society over decades of patient planning. They never met each other. They never communicated directly. They worked alone, in silence, like ghosts haunting a sleeping empire. Samuel completed his final mission on the 3rd anniversary of his arrival on Keth Prime. His target was Director Vethsa, the head of Imperial Intelligence. She was the most protected person in the Empire, outside of the Supreme Commander himself. She had spent 2 years trying to catch the Reaper. She had failed. Now the Reaper had come for her. Samuel found her in her private office, surrounded by 6 of her most trusted guards. The guards were the best in the Empire, trained killers who had never known defeat. They died in 8 seconds. Samuel stood over the director as she crawled toward her desk, reaching for a weapon she would never touch. He watched her without emotion. She had ordered the deaths of millions. She had designed torture programs. She had crushed rebellions across a dozen worlds. "Who are you?" she gasped. "What are you?" "I am what you made," Samuel said. I am what happens when you push a species to the edge of extinction and then forget about them. I am the consequence of your arrogance." He knelt beside her. "We remember everything," he said. "Every death, every crime, every world you destroyed. We wrote it all down. We taught it to our children. We made it part of who we are. And now we are coming back." The director died with fear in her eyes. Samuel wrote his message on the wall in her own blood. 2 words that would echo across the empire. "We are coming." He escaped through a service tunnel that led to a hidden shuttle. The shuttle carried him to a rendezvous point beyond the edge of the system, where a ship was waiting. But it was not the kind of ship that Cathari remembered. It was not crude or primitive or weak. It was something new. Something terrible. Something that should not exist. As Samuel boarded the ship, he removed the false skin that had covered his face for 3 years. Beneath it was a mask of white ceramic, shaped like a human skull. The same symbol he had carved into walls across the empire. The mask of the Reaper. A young officer met him at the airlock. She saluted sharply. "Welcome back, Commander Webb. The fleet is assembled. Admiral Bell is waiting for your report." Samuel nodded. He was tired. 3 years of living as a slave, 3 years of killing and hiding and pretending had taken their toll. But there was no time to rest. The next phase of the plan was about to begin. "Tell the Admiral I am on my way," he said. "And tell him the message has been delivered. The Cathari know we are coming. Now we show them what that means." The ship turned away from Keth Prime and accelerated into the darkness. Behind it, the Cathari Empire was waking up to a nightmare. Their slaves were not broken. Their enemies were not defeated. The humans they had forgotten about had been preparing for 50 years. And now the Reaper was going home to lead them into war. Supreme Commander Vethrak sat in his war room, staring at a map of the Empire that had once filled him with pride. Now it filled him with dread. Red markers covered the outer territories, each one representing a ship that had vanished without a trace. Vethrak was the grandson of the great Zethrak, the conqueror who had crushed Earth 50 years ago. He had grown up hearing stories of that glorious victory. He even taught that humans were weak, primitive, easily broken. He had believed those stories. Now he was not so sure. In the past 5 years, something had been hunting Cathari ships in the outer territories. Cargo vessels disappeared. Military patrols stopped reporting. Mining stations went silent. At first, the official explanation was pirates, remnants of conquered species who refused to accept their fate. Such things happened from time to time, but this was different. Pirates took cargo. Pirates left survivors to spread fear. Pirates wanted something. These attackers left nothing. No wreckage. No bodies. No messages. Ships simply vanished, as if they had never existed. "Show me the pattern," Vethrak commanded. The holographic map shifted, connecting the red markers with glowing lines. The pattern was immediately clear. The attacks formed a spiral, slowly tightening toward the core worlds of the Empire. Whatever was out there, it was getting closer. "What forces do we have in the outer reach?" "The 7th Fleet Supreme Commander. 42 warships under Admiral Cathal. Our finest vessels and crews. Send them to investigate. I want answers." The 7th Fleet departed 2 days later. They were confident, even eager. 42 warships against some unknown raider. It would be a quick victory. It would be a story to tell their children. For 3 weeks, they found nothing. Then they reached the Varanus system. The outpost in Varanus had been built into a large asteroid. It housed 2,000 workers and a small military garrison. It had been there for 100 years, a symbol of Cathari expansion into the frontier. Now it was gone. Admiral Cathal stared at the asteroid through his viewport. The rock was still there, but it was completely smooth. Every building, every antenna, every trace of the outpost had been removed. Not destroyed, removed, as if someone had simply erased it from existence. What could do this? His first officer whispered. Kethel had no answer. The alarm sounded before he could speak. Unknown vessel emerging from subspace. Distance 50,000 kilometers. The ship that appeared on their sensors was unlike anything in the Cathori database. It was massive, 3 times the size of their largest dreadnought. Its hull seemed to flow like liquid metal, constantly shifting and reforming. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. All ships, battle stations, Kethel ordered. Attempt communication. The response came immediately, but not through any channel they expected. The message appeared directly on every screen aboard every ship in the fleet, bypassing their systems entirely. This is Captain Lisa Morgan of the United Earth Expeditionary Force Vessel Judgment. You are in human space. Leave now, and you will be allowed to live. Remain, and you will be destroyed. Silence filled the bridge of the flagship. Human. The message said human. But that was impossible. Humans were slaves. Humans were broken. Humans did not have ships like this. Kethel recovered first. This is a trick, he said. Some conquered species using human names to confuse us. All ships, target that vessel and fire. 42 warships opened fire at once. Plasma beams cut through space. Antimatter torpedoes streaked toward the target. Kinetic rounds accelerated to a fraction of light speed. It was enough firepower to crack a small moon. The barrage struck the human vessel head-on. When the light faded, the Judgment was completely undamaged. Its flowing hull rippled once, like water absorbing a stone, and then stabilized. Not a scratch. Not a dent. Nothing. That is not possible, Kethel breathed. The voice of Captain Lisa Morgan filled the bridge again. You had your chance. Now it is our turn. The Judgment's weapons activated. Kethel never saw what hit them. None of his sensors could track it. None of his shields could stop it. The weapon passed through everything as if matter itself was no obstacle. Ships began to die. The first cruiser simply came apart, its hull separating into a million pieces. Its hull separating into a million pieces. Its hull separating into a million pieces. The second exploded as its reactor was breached. The third went dark, every system failing at once. The fourth, the fifth, the sixth, all dying in different ways, all dying instantly. Kethel screamed orders. Fall back, regroup, retreat. But his fleet could not retreat. They could not even move. The human weapon was everywhere, striking from angles that defied physics. Killing ships faster than his crew could count out in 60 seconds. It was over. 42 warships. The pride of the Caithari Navy, reduced to debris. Only the flagship remained, its systems failing, its hull cracked, its crew dead or dying. Kethel lay on the deck of his ruined bridge. Blood ran from a wound on his head. Around him, his officers were silent. Most of them were dead. With the last of his strength, he reached for the emergency beacon. The galaxy needed to know what had happened here. The Empire needed to know that the humans were not extinct. They were not slaves. They were not weak. He activated the beacon and spoke a single word before death took him. Impossible. The message reached Keth Prime 3 days later. Vethrak listened to it 17 times. Each time, his terror grew. Humans. The humans had done this. The species his grandfather had conquered. The species that had been slaves for 50 years. They had built ships that defied understanding. They had weapons that could not be stopped. They had destroyed an entire fleet in less than a minute. And according to the intelligence reports now flooding his desk, this was not their only ship. Scanners had detected at least 200 similar vessels moving through the outer territories. They were heading toward the core worlds. They were heading toward Keth Prime. Vethrak called an emergency council. "We need every ship we have," he told his admirals. "Every vessel, every weapon, every soldier. We will meet this human fleet and destroy it." His admirals were not so confident. They had seen the recordings from the Seventh Fleet. They had seen ships die without any way to fight back. Supreme Commander, perhaps negotiation. No. Vethrak slammed his fist on the table. "We do not negotiate with slaves. We do not show weakness. My grandfather conquered these creatures once. I will do it again." He gave the orders. 800 warships began assembling. The largest fleet in Keth-Ari history. Surely, this would be enough. But even as he prepared for war, Vethrak could not forget the symbol that had been carved into walls across his empire for 2 years. The skull wearing a hood. The sign of the Reaper. The sign of death coming for them all. The humans had promised they would return Dot, and now they had. The human fleet emerged from hiding like a storm breaking across the galaxy. 200 ships, each one built with technology the Kethari could not understand, struck at 100 targets on the same day. Mining colonies burned. Military bases fell silent. Communication stations were erased from existence. The attacks were precise. The attacks were devastating. The attacks were just the beginning. Admiral Christopher Bell stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Vengeance, watching reports flood in from across the Empire. Every mission was successful. Every target was destroyed. The Kethari had no idea what was happening. Phase 1 complete, his tactical officer reported. All primary targets eliminated. Enemy losses estimated at 120 vessels. Our losses are 0. 0 losses. After 50 years of waiting, 50 years of building, 50 years of planning, they had struck the first blow without losing a single ship. Bell allowed himself a small smile, but the smile faded quickly. This was only the beginning. The real battle was coming. What is the status of the enemy fleet? 800 warships assembled at Keth Prime, Admiral. They are preparing to move against us. 800 ships. The Kethari had gathered everything they had. It was an impressive force. 50 years ago, it would have been unstoppable. But 50 years ago, humans had fought with primitive vessels held together with hope and desperation. They had lost Earth. They had lost everything. Never again. Set course for the Korath system, Bell ordered. All ships. We will meet them there. The Korath system was a barren expanse far from any inhabited world. It was the perfect place for a battle. No civilians to worry about. No planets to protect. Just empty space and 2 fleets that would fight until one of them was destroyed. The Kethari arrived first. Supreme Commander Vethrak arranged his 800 ships in a traditional battlesphere, the formation that had won countless victories over 3 centuries. Heavy dreadnoughts in the center, cruisers and destroyers protecting the flanks, fighters and bombers ready to launch at a moment's notice. It was an impressive display of power. It was meant to intimidate. Then the humans arrived. They came in a single line, 200 ships moving with perfect synchronization. Their vessels were strange and beautiful, their hulls flowing like liquid silver. They made no attempt to spread out or take defensive positions. They simply approached, calm and unhurried. They are outnumbered 4 to 1. Admiral Sethoval observed from his position beside Vethrak. This is suicide? Vethrak was not so sure. He had seen the recordings from the 7th Fleet. He knew what human weapons could do. Numbers might not matter in this fight. All ships maximum alert, he ordered. Fire the moment they enter range. The 2 fleets closed the distance between them. 10,000 kilometers. 5,000. 2,000. Then the human ships did something unexpected. They split apart. Each vessel separated into dozens of smaller units, like a flower blooming in the darkness of space. What had been 200 ships became 12,000 weapons platforms, surrounding the Cathari sphere from every direction. Sethival's face went pale. That is not possible. Ships cannot do that. But clearly, human ships could. All weapons fire. Vethrak screamed. The Cathari fleet unleashed everything they had. Plasma beams, missiles, kinetic rounds. The fire was so intense that space itself seemed to burn. Surely nothing could survive such an attack. The human platforms did not even try to dodge. They simply absorbed the fire, their shields glowing briefly before stabilizing. Then they returned fire. The Cathari battlesphere began to collapse. Ships died by the dozens. The human weapons struck from every angle at once, overwhelming shields and armor as if they were made of paper. Explosions rippled through the formation. Communication channels filled with screams and static. Vethrak watched his fleet being destroyed and felt something he had never experienced before. Helplessness. Complete and total helplessness. His weapons were useless. His tactics were useless. His numbers were useless. The humans were simply better. In less than an hour, it was over. 800 Cathari warships had been reduced to floating debris. Only the flagship remained, its shields failing, its weapons offline, surrounded by silent human platforms. Vethrak waited for death. He had failed his people. He had failed his grandfather's legacy. The humans would destroy him now, and the empire would fall. But death did not come. Instead, a voice filled the bridge. A human voice, calm and controlled. Supreme Commander Vethrak. This is Admiral Christopher Bell of the United Earth Navy. Your fleet is destroyed. Your empire is falling. But I'm not here to kill you. I am here to deliver a message. Vethrak found his voice. What message? Look out your viewport. Vethrak turned to the main screen. Beyond the wreckage of his fleet, beyond the ring of human weapons platforms, something was emerging from subspace. Something vast. Something that made even the human warships look tiny. It was a ship the size of a small moon. Its hull was covered with weapons and launch bays and sensor arrays. It moved slowly, majestically, like a god descending from the heavens. That is the Prometheus, Admiral Bell continued. It carries 50 million soldiers, 3,000 atmospheric craft, and enough firepower to turn your homeworld into a dead rock. It is heading for Keth Prime. Nothing you have can stop it. Vethrak stared at the massive vessel. His people had built nothing like it. His people could build nothing like it. The humans had spent 50 years preparing for this moment, and now he understood just how outmatched his empire truly was. What do you want? He asked. I want you to go home. I want you to tell your people what happened here. I want them to understand that humanity is coming, and nothing in this galaxy can stand against us. Your grandfather believed he had destroyed us. He was wrong. We survived. We grew stronger. And now we are taking back everything that was stolen from us. The transmission ended. The human platforms withdrew, rejoining their motherships. The great fleet turned and accelerated toward Keth Prime, leaving the crippled flagship behind. Vethrak gave the order to return home. His ship limped through space, damaged and alone. He needed to warn his people. He needed to prepare them for what was coming. But in his heart, he knew it was hopeless. The humans had returned. The humans had won. Everything his grandfather had built was about to be torn apart, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. As his ship crawled toward Keth Prime, Vethrak thought about the symbol that had haunted his nightmares for 2 years. The skull wearing a hood. The Reaper. He had thought it was just a terrorist. Just one human causing trouble. Now he understood the truth. The Reaper was not one person. The Reaper was all of them. Every human who had survived. Every human who had trained in secret academies. Every human who had built these impossible ships. They were all the Reaper. They were all death, coming for the empire that had tried to destroy them, and death could not be stopped. The siege of Keth Prime lasted 17 days. Human ships surrounded the homeworld of the empire, forming an unbreakable ring in orbit. Nothing could enter. Nothing could leave. The planetary defense systems fired constantly, desperately, hopelessly. Every missile was shot down. Every beam was absorbed. The humans did not even bother to fire back. They simply waited. 12 billion Kethari watched the sky and waited for the end. On the 18th day, the Prometheus descended through the clouds. The massive ship blocked out the sun as it settled over the imperial city. Its shadow covered everything, turning day into night. Shuttles began dropping from its belly, thousands of them, carrying soldiers in powered armor that made them look like giants of metal and fire. The Kethari military fought back. Of course, they fought back. They had been warriors for 300 years. They had conquered half the galaxy. They would not surrender without a battle. But their weapons could not penetrate the human armor. Their barriers could not stop the human advance. Their soldiers, brave as they were, fell by the hundreds, by the thousands. The human forces moved through the city like a wave, unstoppable and relentless. Supreme Commander Vethrak made his final stand in the Imperial Palace. The building had stood for 5 centuries, a symbol of Cathari power and glory. Now it would be his tomb. He gathered his personal guard around him. 300 of the finest warriors in the empire. They barricaded every entrance. They armed every servant. They prepared every trap. If the humans wanted the palace, they would pay for it in blood. The walls exploded inward. Human soldiers poured through the breaches, moving with inhuman speed and precision. The guards fought with everything they had. It was not enough. In minutes, most of them were dead. The survivors retreated to the throne room, forming a final line around their commander. Vethrak drew his ceremonial blade, the weapon of his ancestors. It had been carried by the leaders of his people for 1,000 years. It had never been raised in defeat. Today, it will be. The doors to the throne room burst open. Human soldiers flooded in, their weapons raised, but they did not fire. Instead, they parted, making way for a single figure. He was tall for a human, wearing armor different from the others. His faceplate was not the standard military design. It was a mask of white ceramic, shaped like a human skull. The Reaper, Samuel Webb, walked through the ranks of soldiers and stopped in front of Vethrak. For a long moment, neither spoke. The last ruler of the Kethari Empire faced the ghost who had haunted his nightmares for years. "Supreme Commander," Samuel said. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "I have been waiting for this moment for a very long time." Vethrak raised his blade and charged. Samuel moved like water, sidestepping the attack and catching Vethrak's arm in an iron grip. He twisted, and the Supreme Commander fell to his knees. The ancient blade clattered to the floor. 53 years ago, Samuel said, your grandfather stood on the bridge of his ship and watched our world burn. He believed he had won. He believed humanity was finished. Samuel reached up and removed his mask. Beneath it was the face of an old man. His skin was scarred and weathered. His hair was gray, but his eyes burned with a cold fire that had not dimmed in half a century. "My name is Samuel Webb. I was born on the colony ship Perseverance. I have lived among your people for 40 years. I have killed 217 of your leaders, and I have survived long enough to see this day." He crouched down to look Vethrak in the eyes. "Your grandfather was wrong. We were not broken. We were not finished. We were waiting. We were learning. We were growing stronger. And now you will learn what your people taught us. What it means to lose everything. Vethrak expected to die. He wanted to die. Death would be better than this humiliation. Will you kill us all? He asked. Samuel was silent for a moment. Then he shook his head. No, that is what you would have done. That is what you did on Earth, on a dozen other worlds. But we are not you. We will not commit genocide. We will not enslave your people. We will not erase your culture from history. He pulled Vethrak to his feet. We will dismantle your empire. We will free every species you conquered. We will rebuild the worlds you destroyed. And your people will help us. Not as slaves, as partners. You will spend the next century making right what your ancestors made wrong. Vethrak stared at him. And if we refuse? Samuel smiled. It was not a kind smile. You will not refuse. Because we have something you never had when you ruled the galaxy. We have mercy. We have the ability to forgive. We have the strength to build instead of destroy. But mercy has limits. Test those limits, and you will discover what 300 years of rage looks like when we stop holding it back. He put his mask back on. The skull stared down at the broken Supreme Commander. The war is over. You lost. Now stand up and face your future. 100 years later, Earth had been restored. The oceans were full again. The forests had grown back. The cities had been rebuilt, not as copies of what was lost, but as something new. Something better. Humans walked the streets alongside dozens of other species, all free, all equal, all building a future together. In the central plaza of the capital city, a monument stood. It was a wall of black stone, covered with names. 17 million names, carved in letters so small that a visitor could spend a lifetime reading them all. The names of everyone who had died in the conquest and the war that followed. At the base of the wall, a bronze statue depicted a human figure removing a skull mask. The plaque beneath it read, "In memory of Samuel Webb and all who walked in shadow so that we might return to the light." An old woman sat on a bench near the monument, watching children play in the plaza. Some were human. Some were Cathari. They ran and laughed together, unaware of the history that had brought them here, unaware that their grandparents had been mortal enemies. The old woman was Lisa Morgan. She had been captain of the Judgment, the first human ship to engage the Cathari in 50 years. Now she was retired, content to watch the world she had helped save grow and change. A young Cathari approached her, holding a computer tablet. "Admiral Morgan? I am a student. I am writing about the war. May I ask you some questions?" Lisa smiled and patted the bench beside her. "Sit down. I will tell you a story. It is not the story you expect. It is not about revenge or hatred or destruction. It is about what happens when you give people a chance to be better than those who hurt them." The young Cathari sat, and Lisa began to speak. Above them, the sun set over a healed earth. The sky turned gold and crimson. Somewhere among the stars, human ships patrolled the borders of a peaceful galaxy. The Empire had fallen. The war was over, and humanity had found something more valuable than victory. They have found their way home, and they had become something their enemies never expected. They had become merciful. They had become hope. The Reaper had removed his mask, and beneath it was not a face of death. It was a face of new beginnings, a face of second chances, a face of a species that had learned, through unimaginable pain, that the best revenge was not destruction. Best revenge was survival. The best revenge was building something beautiful. From the ashes of everything that was lost, the children laughed and played in the plaza. human and Cathari together, and Lisa Morgan watched them with tears in her eyes. This was what they had fought for. This was why they had returned. This was the true victory. Not conquest, not revenge, not the destruction of their enemies. Just this. Just life. Just hope. Just a future where children could play without fear. The Cathari had believed victory was theirs when they burned Earth. They had been wrong. Victory was this moment. This plaza. These children. Victory was peace. And finally, after so many years, humanity had won.